Happy Friday, everybody. The Friday before pre-release, so I like to try to do it a week ahead. I like to do my pre-release guide for the up-and-coming set, which is Duskmourn, House of Horror. So today we're going to be talking about the set's mechanics and rules, kind of be prepared for your pre-release, as well as the archetype themes, what each color pair is attempting to do, at least in theory, and then also go over some of the common interaction that you might expect from your opponent, so you can kind of strategize against what your opponent might play. So first up, Duskmourn introduces a new enchantment type called Rooms. Rooms have two halves called Doors. When a room is cast, you choose which cost to pay, and you can't cast both sides, and initially it only has the half that you paid for's effect. When the room spell resolves, the corresponding door becomes unlocked as the room enters. Then you can pay the other half's cost to unlock its effect as a special action on your main phase when the stack is empty. And when the spell is on the stack, it has a characteristics of the door or half that was cast. And we're going to get a little nitty gritty here because I do think it will actually matter in this set. So, for example, if an effect allows you to cast a permanent spell with mana value 3 or less from cards among your graveyard, you could cast the Bottomless Pool, but not the Locker Room. And it kind of makes sense. You can cast like the split side and not the other one, right? The thing that's kind of a little confusing is while the card is in any zone other than the stack or the battlefield, a room card's characteristics are a combination of its two colors, or its two doors, sorry. So, for example, Bottomless Pool and Locker Room has a mana value of 6 while it's in your library. And if an effect allows you to search your library for a card with mana value 4 or less, you couldn't find Bottomless Pool Locker Room. Right? So in your graveyard, it's got a mana value of 6, but you can still cast it as a spell that's 3 or less because of how it works on the stack. While on the battlefield, a room's characteristics are a combination of the unlocked doors. So, for example, if a Bottomless Pool Locker Room is on the battlefield with both doors unlocked, its names are Bottomless Pool and Locker Room, and its mana value is 6, and it's a room enchantment, and it has the abilities of the each text box. If a room enters from any zone other than the stack, it will enter with both halves locked. And if neither door of a room is unlocked, it's a room enchantment with no name and no abilities. So some abilities allow you to unlock a door of a room you control. You can't choose to unlock a door that's already unlocked with such an ability. If you need a required target, though, you can still target the room, even if both of its doors are unlocked. The ability just won't do anything when it resolves. And some doors have abilities that trigger whenever you unlock that door and require one or more targets. If you can't target something, if there's insufficient legal targets, then the room still is unlocked and the triggered ability just won't go on the stack. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing, but I think there's going to be some questions around the new enchantments. We also have a new keyword, impending, which is on 5 new mythics with Overlord in their name. So each color got an Overlord card, and they are all enchantment creatures. And impending works similar to Suspend, but the card is placed on the battlefield as an enchantment instead of in exile. And so you cast a creature spell for its impending cost. It will enter with a X amount of time counters on it. So impending 4 would have 4 time counters on it. And then as long as it has a time counter on it, if it was cast for its impending cost, if it's not a creature, then at the beginning of your end step, you'll remove one of the time counters from it. And then if it has no time counters on it, it loses impending. And so a minor rule is if you were to copy a impending enchantment, then it would come in with no time counters on it and immediately be a creature. The other new mechanic is Manifest Dread. And to manifest Dread, you look at the top 2 cards of your library, and then you take one and manifest it by putting it onto the battlefield face down, and put the other into your graveyard. The card that you put into the battlefield becomes a 2/2 face down creature with no name, no mana cost, creature types, or abilities. So very similar to like Disguise or Morph. It's colorless and has a mana value of 0. Anytime that you have priority, you can turn the manifested permanent face up by revealing that it's a creature card and paying its mana cost. And this is done as a special action similar to Morph. It doesn't use the stack, and it can't be responded to. And unlike the face-down creatures that you do cast with Disguise or Morph, a manifested creature can still be turned up even if it loses its abilities, which Morph and Disguise need to have the Morph and Disguise part of the ability on the card to flip. So Manifest Dread, you don't need that. If your library contains not enough cards to manifest, so you'll have like one card when you manifest Dread, you'll look at that card and put it onto the battlefield face down, and you won't have the option to put it into your graveyard instead. And if your library contains no cards when you manifest Dread, you won't do anything, but the abilities that trigger whenever you manifest Dread will still trigger. We also have Survival as a new ability, similar to Inspired, but triggers at the beginning of your second main phase if the creature is tapped. So you can tap it by attacking, but there's also other ways that you can tap it without having to attack it. If a creature with the survival ability isn't tapped when your second main phase begins, the ability won't trigger at all. So you won't be able to like tap it in response. Have the ability trigger. If a creature's survival ability triggers, but that creature is untapped when the ability then resolves, that ability won't do anything. So if a creature's survivor ability triggers, but the creature leaves the battlefield before the ability resolves, it will use its last known information of whether or not it was tapped or untapped to determine whether or not the survival trigger will happen. And Eerie is a new ability word as well. It's a variation on Constellation, so it triggers whenever an enchantment enters, but also triggers when you fully unlock a room. And an ability that triggers whenever you fully unlock a room triggers when a door becomes unlocked and the other side of the room is also already unlocked, or when both doors of that room become unlocked simultaneously. We also see the return of the Delirium mechanic or ability from Shadows over Innistrad. Delirium requires 4 or more card types among the cards in your graveyard, so the set is a mixture of enchantment matters and graveyard matters. And so a single card can contribute to multiple card types for the purpose of Delirium. There has to be at least 4 or more card types in your graveyard in order for the ability to trigger. And then the number of card types is checked again as the trigger resolves. And if that number has become too low, like somebody removes your cards from your graveyard in response to the trigger, then the ability does nothing. All right, so now that we've got the rules out of the way, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I've been playing Magic the Gathering for a really long time. I have a pretty strong concept of the rules, so happy to ask you guys, answer any of your questions in the comments below. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the archetypes and what each archetype is doing. So Azorius, or White-Blue, is built around the Eerie mechanic and encourages you to play a large density of enchantments and enchantment creatures, including rooms, although not limited specifically to rooms, and that will allow you to kind of trigger the Eerie a second time. And while White-Blue is typically a control space or a flying archetype, in this set it's more of a tempo, which is like aggro control. So you're going to use your spells to disrupt your opponent while then pushing damage quickly, trying, winning sooner than what you typically would with a control deck. Orsov, or Black-White, is focused on reanimation as a reanimator control. The deck stalls the opponent in the early to mid game. It has really good instant speed removal in both white and black. And then you're trying to discard or self-mill to get big threats into your graveyard, which you then reanimate later in the game to win. So you need a lot of removal, and it's a pretty slow archetype. Boros is aggro, no surprise there. So it's specifically power 2 or less. So you've got the aggro deck going on here, and you've got a lot of small creatures that take advantage of the effects that care about creatures with power 2 or less. So lots of the little, almost like a white weenie kind of vibe. And then we've got survival mid-range for Celestia or green-white. And you can, as I mentioned, activate your survival creatures by attacking, but when the board gets stalled, the deck has other ways to tap your creatures, which then can kind of slowly whittle down your opponent into the mid to late game. Dimir is Eerie Control. So blue-black is the full version of control, whereas white-blue is the tempo. You're going to use similar tools that you would in white-blue, being like enchantments and disruption coming from those enchantments. In Dimir, though, it's more of a way to answer all of your opponent's plays and lock down the game, and then get the long-term control plan going on and have some form of win condition. And you do have better removal, I think, with the addition of black, and specifically discard. Blue-red is room control, and this one, if white-blue is caring about enchantments and blue-black is being more of a controlling enchantment space, blue-red is also looking like control, but is more heavily focused on rooms specifically as the way to win. So you're going to lean the furthest into the room strategy or subtype, and not as much enchantments in general. There are some cool room alternative win conditions, though, right? You can win with directly doing stuff with rooms, most easily done in blue-red. Green-blue or Simic is the Manifest Dread mid-range. And I chuckled there because like Simic is kind of known to be not the most competitive space in a lot of archetypes. And so naming it Manifest Dread is just kind of comical. But you're basically focusing on making a lot of those face down 2/2 creatures, which then you can turn up into larger threats, right? And so you're going to want to have a high permanent count so that you have a higher likelihood of hitting a creature within your Manifest Dread cards. And then we've got Sacrifice Midrange for Rakdos or Black-Red. And we've seen Sacrifice a lot for Rakdos as an archetype, although it has actually been a while since it's kind of returned to its true form. So in Duskmourn, it makes sense. It's a familiar space for Black-Red, and you have a lot of... so this is kind of the blend of the two, where you have the Delirium and the Graveyard Matters, and then you have the enchantments, and so you're kind of trying to do both in this archetype. So you're trying to use the enchantments to create resources that then become sacrifice fodder and strengthen your other creatures and spells, and then a blend of enchantment matters and graveyard matters. I think specifically leaning itself best to a mid-range space. There's not as much aggro as I would like in... you could probably make aggro work, but I think it's going to take a little bit longer to get the Delirium turned on to really take advantage. I think it fits more as a mid-range deck. And we've got the Delirium Control in black-green. I think this one is... you're going to spend a lot of your time gumming up the board with defensive creatures with reach, big booties to try to slow things down. And then as the game progresses through the self-mill and through discard, you're eventually going to turn on Delirium and then use your graveyard as a resource to outvalue your opponent. So it's going to be a very grindy archetype that lends itself well to control. And then Delirium aggro is red-green or Gruul. And this one... so we've seen kind of a 4-power matters or, ferocious kind of archetype going on in Gruul for quite some time. And this one is now just like returning to aggro. And so you're looking to use a whole bunch of cheap creatures like Boros. But as the aggro trades off resources, you can then tap into some of the Delirium. And so... somewhere between aggro that goes into mid-range, sometimes called Stompy, I think fits pretty well, and it was the intention for the Gruul space. After that, let's talk about the fixing in the set. The it looks like the set was designed with the intention of being a pretty focused two-color deck, two-color archetypes. I don't think that the set splashes particularly well outside of green. I think green has your best mana fixing. So you've got like a couple of options. One of which is the Moldering Gem, which allows you to look for a basic land card and put it into the battlefield tapped. You also have the Say Its Name and Spineseeker Centipede, which both allow you to go find that land and help dig for other lands. So green, I think, is going to be your most likely space to be multicolored, and that's not uncommon, right? As far as the lands go, we did get Terramorphic Expanse, which is like Evolving Wilds. Will help you splash into those bombs, especially later on in the game. And we also got 10 basic lands that are the not the Verge lands, sorry, those are the rares. The 13 or less life lands, which can fix for the 10 archetypes. All right, and now for the instances. So white has, I think, the best removal at instant with black at common. So you've got some combat tricks to keep in mind. If they have the one white, look out for the +2/+2. I think the fact that it can gain flying also helps you push in additional damage. And Seized from Slumber, we've had this kind of card before where if you're the beatdown and you're being really aggressive, your opponent's not going to have tapped creatures, and then this becomes a worse card. So this is going to be a card that works better in a control archetype rather than an aggro archetype. And then for blue, we've got the Quench, which is the counterspell unless they pay 2. It also comes in with the Surveil for the Graveyard Matters. And then we also have a Cancel. And if you don't have a good target for your cancel, then you can also do it as an instant speed way to create a 2/2 and do the Manifest Dread. So keep those in mind if your blue opponent is doing the draw go strategy. We also see the bounce of Vanish from Sight, and we also have a bounce and other removal in uncommon. But I think, let's keep things simple for the pre-release and just do the commons. So being able to bounce something is better the more that it goes into the mid-range and kind of control. Sometimes Tempo can use this as a way to remove as well. And we've seen this one a lot, though, right? So Given to Violence is a combat trick similar to the +2/+2 that you see in white. You also get a +2/+2 and lifelink in black. And then we have Murder, an instant speed removal for 1 double pip black that we've seen before. And that's kind of what makes me think that black and white is probably the most creature-centric controlling space for being able to stall into your Reanimator strategy. Winter's Intervention gives you the 2 damage and then gains 2 life. Nothing too amazing there. And an Appendage Amalgam is a common creature with flash. So if they do have 2 and a black, keep that in mind that they could bring in a 3/2 and trade with your board. As far as red goes, we've got your typical creature-centric removal. A little bit of that Delirium thrown in there for the red-green archetype. There's also some combat tricks in red that help out. So we've got a spread of decent combat tricks and removal in the set at common. And target creature gets +3/+0 and then manifests Dread. So I think this one fits into several of the aggro strategies and archetypes. And then Horde Vigor, Death Touch, and Indestructible. Really happy they made this one in a green instead of just 1 green. Because we've seen a lot of that like Hexproof and Indestructible for 1 green in previous sets. The fact that it gets Death Touch, though, really makes that one a spicy one to remember. And then the Frantic Strength is a flash enchantment that can give a creature +2/+2 and trample, which the trample really intrigues me, especially in like a stompy or a mid-range where it can help push your damage through. And then the fact that it's an enchantment can help fill further permanence into your graveyard. And we do also have a colorless flash artifact with the Bear Trap. This one I'm a little bit less worried about. For 4, they could deal 3 damage to target creature at instant speed. Less necessary to work that around that one. So thanks for listening to my pre-release guide. I hope that it helps you out. If you have any other questions, feel free to hit me up in the comments below. And sorry that this was a little bit rougher than my usual pre-release guides. Been, you know, about to leave town and doing this last minute, so kind of it is what it is. So if you're new here, welcome to my community. I do a best of 1, best of 3 standard review every Monday. Do a lot of draft videos and stuff on Twitch for drafts as well. And yeah, take care, everybody, and good luck on your pre-release.